What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to another episode of Around the Burgh. I'm your host, Mitchell Wolf, here with my co-host, Shane Kubis. And unfortunately, we're not going to have some kind of a funny intro anecdote because this is going to be kind of a serious episode.
Yeah,
Given the recent passing of Dwayne Haskins, Steelers backup quarterback, on Saturday morning. Um, so we're just going to kind of dive right into that because it's the biggest story that involves the Steelers right now. And it's obviously extremely tragic because Dwayne Haskins is only 24 years old,
yeah,
and even though his career didn't get off to the best start, he seemed to be kind of turning it around. Um,
yeah.
you know, seemed to be kind of launching into a second phase that might have turned it around for him. Uh, but yeah, Shane's here too.
Yeah, I'm here, and unfortunately, like you said, Mitch, this is kind of really where we're at right now with Steelers news. We don't want to get too deep in anything else, just because it kind of wouldn't feel right with
Mhm.
everything with him. So we'll definitely talk a lot about what he brought to the team and just in general what the NFL lost with him. So
Yeah, so it was on Saturday morning, and it was reported that it trickled out that it seemed like he was hit by a dump truck when he was trying to cross the highway
yeah,
on Saturday morning down in Florida, where he was down there with a bunch of other Steelers players training. Which just a weird thing that happened. There's been kind of some back and forth about why was he crossing the road like
right.
that. Um, Not sure why. But we'll never really know, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think the leading theory or talking point was that he may have run out of gas,
Yeah.
trying to get help of some kind, and I don't
Hmm.
know, what the story is there, but hopefully, I as much as I'd like to know the specifics, I'm not really sure how much it really matters at this point, like the specifics of why. It's just more so what happened. So
Yeah, and then soon after that, the report comes out, and it's initially from Adam Schefter, who in his
yeah,
tweet says that Haskins was a struggling prospect, which then got quickly deleted and replaced, which has kind of become a bit of a thing for Schefter now. And he did release an apology on his own podcast a few hours ago,
yeah.
um, and kind of refocus the narrative on Dwayne Haskins, which was nice to see. But it is just kind of this becoming this pattern with Schefter these days about just weirdly insensitive tweets.
Yeah, it's just it feels like, and like obviously I don't know what it's like to be a guy that is plugged in and getting as much stuff all the time as he is. Like I'm sure it's a whirlwind at times, and like the amount of information that he's trying to get in and out of different things. But at some point, like you have to look at yourself and go, am I doing this in a way that's ethical?
Yeah.
Right? Because obviously there's certain things where like there's really serious gray areas. Like there's been times where reporters have tweeted out like medical information from about players and like stuff like just stuff that's really not probably something you want to be doing as a general practice, but it
Hmm.
is what it is. And like it's a cutthroat business. I know that much. Like it's not like I can really blame them for trying to get information out as soon as possible, but he didn't have to do it the way that he did. He
Yeah,
literally could
it's
have just not said the part about him being a struggling player, and no one would have had any problem with it.
Yeah, and like you said, he gets the news out there first. And it's like there was just no need to put that
Yes.
editorial spin on it. You could have just reported the fact, former first round pick backup quarterback of the
Right.
Pittsburgh Steelers was, tragically struck and killed on a highway in Florida. It's like there was no need to put that. Like, granted, I mentioned that earlier, but as
It
the first report of it, you need to just put the facts out there, which
right.
you
And
know,
like he doesn't have to, like you said,
no,
we all know his story. Like we
yeah,
don't if you're a fan of the NFL, if you know who Dwayne Haskins is, you know where what his career arc has been, you
yeah,
know about him as a player. Like you don't need to be reminded in the moment that you find out he's passed away. Like
yeah.
and I don't even want to put too much time in the whole Gil Brandt situation because
Oh
that
my
was just
god, I
really
that was on
disgusting.
a yeah. Like Schefter's thing was one thing, and it's like
Schefter was insensitive like he was irresponsible in the way he reported it. This is a whole different thing
yeah,
with Brandt.
and like with Schefter, I can get where you could at least it is a spin, but you can at least spin it where it's like this is part of his career arc. Like you're just it is
Right.
a play. Whereas Brandt, just the things he said in that radio hit were just wild speculation. Again, Dwayne Haskins has not been a perfect player off the field in his first year.
No.
I get that, but
Right.
he said he was living to die,
Yeah, it's
just
just
it wasn't. It's what are we talking about?
like what has this guy done that makes you think he didn't care about whether he lived or died? Like what
Yeah,
is that? Because that's what he's insinuating with that.
yeah,
That's literally what he's and I'm like, what could he have like, unless there's something we somehow don't know about that Gilbrand of all people knows, what could he possibly mean by that? Like, I
Yeah,
just
and
don't
like
understand.
everything that's come out about Dwayne Haskins since then has been like this very like happy person
Yeah,
that was always very personable and everything. It's not like he was, and again, I'm not passing judgment on people with these issues, but like it's not like he was, addicted to drugs and alcohol and was like,
right.
you know, kind of like almost like he was. It wasn't like he was like a Ryan going on down like the Ryan Leaf arc,
Right, or
you know,
even, like, again, like, it just it was so just unnecessary and also just made no sense,
and
like, it
like
wasn't even like he
hours
was
after it happened, like
right.
as it was breaking, it was crazy.
Just yeah, I honestly couldn't believe it when I heard it just 'cause I was like, "How could you go on to the radio and, like, because it felt like he was ready to say these things about
Yeah,
him, like,
yeah.
it wasn't just, like, off the top of his head, like,
Like
he
he was like
was
he's been like waiting to get this off his chest,
right,
which
or
that
something, and
is
I'm like,
really weird.
I don't know, that was the one that really, like Schefter is Schefter, and this is not something new for him, and, like, you
Yeah,
just hope that he finally gets it at some point,
yeah.
but this was a whole
And
different
Brant just
level.
coming out of the clouds to just completely smear this man for
Just
like as his
mm,
body isn't even cold was just
yeah,
gross. I
yeah.
and I just yeah I've been just reading the quotes from it. I don't even think I didn't even want to listen to it because of
I
how
did, and it was just a rambling piece of just a mess,
that's why you
honestly.
don't put 90-year-old people on
Yeah, I
radio.
mean, that's a whole other story, but yeah, that was the thing I think bothered me the most is like first of all, there's no time for it ever,
Yeah.
but especially in the like you said, within the hours of us knowing about this and it being put out there, he's like,
Hmm.
by the way, not surprised, basically, is what he's
Yeah.
pretty much saying. And I'm like, okay, whatever, man. Like,
Yeah, and like again, like I'm not saying this is right, but like if he was a player who had had a lot of those struggles and was
yeah,
killed in a manner that was consistent with that, it's like okay, like I could kind of it would be insensitive, but I
right,
could see like it's like yeah, he's always had these struggles, and it's really unfortunate that it ended this way. But it was just like it's a freak accident that has nothing to do with like his quality as a person. It's just a
right.
random tragedy that he did not need to go out and
Yeah,
say those things about him. It
it
was
was
just so
just
strange.
it was just so like, and the stories that have come out about Dwayne in the
Yeah.
wake of this, like it all paints the picture of at worst he was a naive kid, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the absolute worst case scenario
Yeah.
for him is that he just was young, obviously, and just maybe didn't get certain things yet, and that was kind
Yeah.
of the story about him, and like, but again, like that's nothing to crucify someone
No,
for. We've all
absolutely
been in that point. A lot of us are in that point right now.
not. Mhm.
So like it just that one really was what I think hurt a lot of people and made a lot of people really upset
Yeah,
for sure.
and I think that's kind of unfortunately, that will be kind of the book on Haskins is that he got kind of thrust into this situation
Yeah,
in Washington where probably too much got put on his shoulders too quickly,
yeah,
and that kind of swallowed him up, and it, like, even with that, he was still able to, he got out of that situation, was seeming to kind of turn things around, in Pittsburgh, but, like, always still had that positive attitude where,
yeah,
like, all of his teammates loved him, seemed like a great guy, and, obviously he has a wife, and I think I'm not sure, I think he might have a child, which is really unfortunate,
yeah,
but a lot of great tributes out there to him as a person, as a player, but yeah, just really sad and, you know, kind of now becoming a running thing with the Steelers as of late with
yeah,
random tragedies. Like, I mean, this is a bit tangential, but you have Jerry Olsavsky's wife dying in the middle of the season. Then 2 years ago, you have the wide receivers coach Daryl Drake passing away.
yeah,
Um, so just kind of all this weird stuff that happened, and you know, obviously this is just like so out of the blue that it's just really even
yeah,
hard to kind of. And I think that's kind of why people like kind of jump down Schefter's throat and you know, whether or not it's good or not. And then the Brant one, I think, is more deserving of people getting angry about it. But
yeah, a
you
little
have
bit,
this
yeah,
senseless tragedy that is kind of out of nowhere, and you're kind of looking for somewhere to kind of place your anger, and you're like, all right, this person did a dumb thing on Twitter. I'm going to go after them to kind of,
yeah. And as much as like I think that generally is not a healthy thing to do, I think that in certain cases when especially when it's as bad as what Brant did,
yeah.
I'm not gonna criticize someone. Like I tweeted about Schefter and the fact that I think the consistency of this thing that he's been doing, where he just seems to just say things in a way that clearly don't need to be said that way, and
Hmm.
doesn't even spin it in a way that really makes sense or is good for his brand or for ESPN. Like,
Yeah.
sure, it's getting people to talk about him, but in a way that like he doesn't need to get bad publicity at this point. He's not at a place where he's trying to rise to the ranks. right? Like
He's the guy.
he's firmly there. He should be focusing on doing the best job he can and not being a guy that that's easy to hate. Like that's realistically what you'd hope he does. And I really feel like simply for to make a statement, and also to kind of, it seems like the apology, I haven't listened to it. I'm not sure what all he said, but
it's pretty formulaic, to be honest.
yeah. So, again, I don't think he does. I really don't think he's capable right now because of how deep he is in this stuff of really, he needs some introspection when it comes to the way he's been reporting. I think that the only way that he would really get that, I think, is if they were to sit him down for X amount of time in some way, shape, or form. I don't think that's going to happen.
Considering he just signed a massive deal with
right?
ESPN,
yeah, I don't think that's going to be happening. But
we're 2 weeks out, 2 or 3 weeks out from the draft, so
right, it's not going to happen. But
yeah, and they still like to kind of use him as an ancillary to the basketball coverage. But
yes,
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything else that we want to touch on? Because I do, obviously this is very sad, but I do want to talk about how this affects the Steelers' strategy moving forward, because
it's gonna be talked about no matter what. It's gonna be part of it. I really think the other thing I think that maybe sometimes people don't think about as much, because there's this idea that like players who once they get to the NFL, what they did in college doesn't seem to be talked about as much anymore, and how good or bad they were in college doesn't seem to be talked about as much. But with Haskins' case, I mean, he changed the way Ohio State plays offensive football. Like his season he had in 2018 really kind of changed the conference as a whole, but especially Ohio State in the way that they have attacked on offense from that point moving forward. And I don't think he's going to get enough credit for that down the road. And maybe he will now, because people are thinking about him more. And that's obviously, I guess, in some way good. But I don't want to think about the fact that he didn't reach what he could have been in the NFL, because he really earned where he got to as far as being a first round pick, and what he did in college is excellent for that year.
Yeah. And I mean, like, he rewrote the Big Ten record book as a passer.
Big time.
And like you said, for the longest time, Ohio State and the Urban Meyer offense relied on mobile running threat quarterbacks. And Haskins was not that, despite what Stephen A. Smith would try to tell you.
that whole thing. Yeah.
So, he was a pure pocket passer, and, that, like you said, revolutionized their offense. And, Ryan Day, he had a press conference today and spoke about it kind of in the opening, which was a really touching moment considering how like close he's been with Haskins.
Yeah.
I think because he took over as head coach the year after Haskins left.
I think it was 2019. Yeah. I think it was 2019.
So, but he was the offense coordinator with Haskins, and, was been a big part of his growth and development and all that. And the other thing I do want to mention is that, like, I think, so like Chase Claypool posted this video where he was very emotional. And, if Chase Claypool posts a video, people are going to act up, I guess. It's just,
they do.
Yeah. And I didn't even want to read the comments because I knew they were going to be stupid. But I imagine they were saying, you need to be tougher, and which is like, this happened hours ago. And again, Chase Claypool is not exactly like an older person, even if he was like this, again, a very senseless tragedy that you're not prepared for whatsoever. So, if he's I'll say, like, maybe him posting the video is like kind of like, you could twist that to being like, that's a little weird. Like, why are you posting a video of your reaction to this? Like, I get that, but I don't think that's why people were coming after him for it. Like
so from what I saw of it, because I didn't want to look at it too much either. It kind of was about like, oh, well, you're making this about you, or you're just posting this for yourself. I'm like, so here, a couple of things. As much as you can say a lot of things about Chase's maturity level and like where he's at as a football player, whatever, I'm not going to make a comment about how someone grieves about something.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm just not. I'm not willing to do that. I don't care. Like, because that's the same thing when people like post like, their last moments with their relative or something like that. And they're like, oh, this is terrible. Why would you put this? Like, that might just be how they want to handle the situation.
Yeah.
And for you to criticize them for that is, you just need to kind of look at your own self in the situation. Like, you don't know how this is affecting him, because again, it was a teammate of his. Chase is very much a guy that kind of wears his emotions for better or for worse.
Yeah, which we've talked about for a long time.
Yeah, like, for better or for worse, that's where he is. And I'm not going to criticize him in this moment, because I'm not a psychopath. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to do that. Like, if that's how he wants to process things, if he wants to show, that it's okay to be, to have that level of emotion and let people see that, I think that's a good thing overall. And if that helps him in some way, or if he thinks it helps people, then good for him. But to
Yeah.
criticize him for it, I think is just being way too
Yeah, I'm
just
not criticizing him for that doesn't really add anything
it doesn't.
to
It
the
doesn't help the
world or
situation
the
at all.
general conversation about anything. If you want to think that the way he was doing that was making it about himself, I think you're entitled to that opinion, but
Right.
that's something you should just keep to yourself, especially with how raw this all was.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
I
you know,
just didn't like
so
it. But
so like I said, we're gonna kind of move on to look at this from the football perspective, which
yeah.
it's that is what it is. There's only this happened. It's like we said, it's very tragic. And it's really just like because like I think he was younger than both of us.
Yeah, he actually was. Well, no, he was 2 months younger than me. So,
Okay, yeah,
because his birthday I think is May 3rd, and mine's March 2nd. We're
yeah,
basically 24, 25.
yeah,
So it it does freak you out when something like
yeah,
this happens to somebody this young too. It really
yeah,
does, because anything can
yeah.
happen to
So
anybody. So
yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So, but like I said, we're gonna at least attack. We're gonna look at this from the football perspective. So the thing that kind of got coupled with this and obviously then flew under the radar was that Josh Dobbs signed with the Browns this
yes, he did.
weekend.
Yeah.
Um, and so now basically the Steelers are down to two quarterbacks on the roster. They have Mitch
Yeah.
Trubisky and Mason Rudolph. And the way that I see this moving forward is that I think that this might push the Steelers a lot more towards taking a quarterback in the first two rounds, and maybe even
Hmm.
especially in the first,
Yeah.
because I think now you kind of have to take that swing. Because like at least with Haskins, you at least kind of had that kind of wild card in your back pockets, like, hey, like maybe like he could turn into something down the road.
Yeah.
But now you're kind of stuck with what, you kind of know what Mason Rudolph is at this point. He's probably not going to win the job. You kind of know what
No,
he is.
I don't imagine. Yeah.
And Trubisky is still that wild card, but I'd say this ceiling for him is still limited, and you are still looking down the road to like, how are we going to get our next franchise quarterback, or even just the guy after Trubisky?
Yeah, I do think your comment about having Haskins there as a wild card was relevant, because his name was kind of not being talked about as much, obviously, once Trubisky was
Hmm.
brought in. But I do think that had he obviously been given the opportunity, or had the opportunity to compete, he would have been the backup quarterback this year. I really think he would have
Yeah,
beaten Rudolph out, because Rudolph has 1 year left on his deal. They're not gonna. I don't think they'll be bringing him back in any
yeah.
capacity, especially if he doesn't get on the field.
Hmm.
I think that just from an upside standpoint alone, and the fact that they, like you said, they really already know what they have in Mason,
Hmm.
I think he would have had a solid opportunity to compete for legitimately being the backup,
Yeah.
opposed to last year where it didn't really seem like he was in contention.
And yeah, we saw him in the preseason, and it wasn't, he wasn't out there, consistently lighting it up in the preseason against backups, but there were still flashes, and I think you could kind of chart a path where it's like, okay, yeah, like you're saying, like, yeah, he could be the backup, and him having another year in the Canada system, especially one where they're gonna, open it up a little more and not just be, the Ben Roethlisberger offense with a light dressing of the Canada
Yeah,
offense.
right. I think that would have benefited him a lot, and I think that, again, in his second year in the system and more comfortable with everything, I think his talent level being higher than Rudolph would have shined through
Hmm.
more,
Yeah.
and it would have been pretty clear. I feel like in practice, as long as he had everything down from a playbook
Hmm.
standpoint, he would have been better than him.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. So like I said, for that reason, like, so the big thing is that like Kevin Colbert said, we're going to enter the season with four quarterbacks, or at least enter like training camp with four
right.
quarterbacks in the roster. So, I don't know if they're going to go out and sign somebody else. I think people might bring up, oh, like maybe they'll get back in on like trading for Jimmy G or Baker Mayfield. I don't think that's the case because those guys' cap numbers are so prohibitively high.
That, and like it seems like they're very confident going into the season with Trubisky as the starter, and I think
Right.
that makes a lot of sense, because again, you didn't pay him obviously a ton of money or anything
Hmm.
like that, but you paid him enough where the expectation is he's going to be the starter.
Hmm.
Trading for a guy who legitimately should start over him, or at least would have a high chance of
Hmm.
beating him out. would make a lot of sense, like you said, especially for cap related purposes.
Yeah, like Jimmy G's cap hit is like 26 million,
Yeah, it's
Baker's
just
is
way too much
18, and
money.
the team only
Yeah.
has like 14 million in cap
Yeah,
space.
like if they had done that obviously as a precursor to everything, that's
Hmm.
one thing. But now that they've made their moves, they're not in a position to do that without having to move money around, which you don't want to have to do. So
Yeah.
realistically, I think the most likely thing is maybe they do bring in another veteran of some kind, just as kind of insurance for if Rudolph really just sucks, or if
Yeah.
just having another guy on the roster that because they expected to have Haskins on the roster.
Yeah,
But
and I mean, so I found some names that for a veteran backup that they
yeah,
could bring in. So the ones I found were Ryan Fitzpatrick, Blake Bortles, the Steeler killer, AJ
yes, yeah,
McCarron, Geno Smith, and then Colin Kaepernick. So a very
right,
interesting cadre of people there. But
yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
that the purpose of bringing any one of these guys in is they're all. I think they're well, Bortles might not be, but they're all in like their early 30s or late 20s. So they've all been around the league for multiple teams. They're
yes,
all pretty smart players. They've all been backups for a long time. So just getting somebody that, is more I don't know, it's weird. It's like more professional, but just has more professional experience in the NFL.
yes,
I
more
think would be really
potential to
valuable.
yeah, exactly, more
Be
potential
really
to help
valuable
out.
there. And then still drafting a guy. And like again, like I don't know if that's gonna I think now because of that, I think they're really going to be like, all right, now we kind of need to get somebody that can be a legitimate challenger to Mason as a backup, and then maybe even Trubisky as a starter.
Yeah, and like as much as I will say I'd love to have Ryan Fitzpatrick play for the Steelers at some point,
Yeah,
just because dude is just the coolest guy on the planet in
yeah,
terms like if you could take I think of any quarterback, if I had to pick a quarterback to have a career as like if I could have his career that wasn't like a superstar quarterback or a
Chase
guy
Daniel.
that
Chase Daniel's the
well,
number one.
You see Chase Daniel, yeah, money wise, yes,
Money
100%. But
wise, lack of being hit
right,
wise,
exactly.
because
But
Fitzpatrick hasn't
Fitz,
made that
yeah.
much money, and he's gotten his butt kicked.
That's true, but I just like being able to say that you're Ryan Fitzpatrick
Oh
would be the
yeah.
coolest. Like, yeah, everybody knows Chase Daniel just because he's the ultimate finesser. Like, he's
Hmm.
like outside of like he's the backup version of Kirk Cousins,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like I'm gonna get you to pay me a significant amount of money to do literally nothing other than sit here and maybe help with your quarterback. I don't really even know.
Here,
And
before
great,
we continue this, this is kind of a hypothetical I had a few weeks
okay,
ago.
all right,
Uh, who do you think has had the more impressive career
okay,
financially?
okay.
Kirk Cousins or Chase Daniel?
It's hard because like Kirk is up there with the highest paid players in the history of this sport,
For
right?
being a very mediocre
Right, like
quarterback.
he is again for being a guy that like yes, is he a starting quarterback? Absolutely. Is he a guy that you would want to pay what like 45 million or whatever it is right now his deal is this year? No. But
And yet that's what he's been getting paid for like the last 5
exactly.
years.
Right. So like I kind of want to say Kirk just because like as much as Daniel he's made such a great career for himself for doing very little, right? At least on the field. But it's really hard to not say Kirk Cousins. I mean, because to be one of the highest paid players in the history of the NFL, when you aren't even in the top 10 at your position most years, even contention to be in the top 10 of your position most
Mhm.
years, is you got to give guy a lot of credit for that. Because it's easy sometimes to like prove that you're smart enough and good enough to be a backup quarterback for a long time to a certain degree, and maybe you can convince teams to pay you good money to do it. But to continue to make teams pay you top dollar to be a middle of the road quarterback is kind of insane.
Yeah, I mean,
So
Chase Daniel he's thrown 261 passes
right,
in his NFL career,
yeah, sounds
and
about right.
I'm gonna try to pull up his career earnings because
It's got to be like what 60 million ish, right?
it's
Something
up
like that.
there. Low key, there's another one, Tyler Bray, who threw
Yeah,
like three
he
passes and made a
right.
ton.
He
Let's
did,
see.
yeah. Because wasn't he
Yeah,
like a
he's
backup for the Chiefs or something for a while, or like
yes,
a third
and the
string or something?
Bears. All right, so
Oh, the
career
Bears.
earnings for Chase Daniel is just under. Actually, it's by the time his contract with the Chargers ends, he'll be right under $42 million
Oh, $42 million. Okay.
for
200.
261 pass attempts. Yeah,
God, that's like close to like what is what like 1.7 ish, 1.8 ish million
yeah, it's
per
yeah,
pass.
yeah, which that's great. But then like it's just like the matter of like the overachieving of Kirk Cousins in terms of his
Right.
financials relative to his play. Yeah, so Tyler Bray,
Uh-huh.
first of all, played in the league for 9 seasons.
Yeah, which doesn't
Which
sound
is just
right.
like, wait, really?
It doesn't sound right because I remember him coming out.
Yeah,
So what was I
career
doing at the time?
earnings just under 4.4 million.
For what, 3
Let's
passes you said or
let's
something like
let's
that?
it is not many passes. I'm pulling that up now. 6 passes.
6 passes. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah.
Yeah, and 1 completion.
Oh my god, 1 completion.
one for
I w
1 for 5 for 18 yards.
I would have rather had 0 completions if I was him.
Yeah. No,
You know,
I think
'cause
the 1 is low key great because it's like I have
yeah,
completed a pass in the
in the
NFL
NFL
and
and
I got paid
yeah,
$4 million for that
to
one
to do
completion.
it. Then yeah, that's actually probably a better story to tell
Yeah.
than saying I threw 0 passes. That's again, like, quarterbacks, man, like, there's no these people have been saying it for years, there's no better position to be in the NFL than a backup quarterback because you don't have to deal with the spotlight, you don't have to deal with the expectations.
Alex Moran, baby.
Yeah, if you do have to come in and play, if you do great, you're a freaking legend. If you don't do
Devlin
good,
Hodges. Devlin
yeah,
Hodges is immortal.
exactly. Right. If you're bad, everyone just says, "Yeah, of course he's bad. He's the backup."
Yeah.
There's literally you can't lose. Like Mike White last year,
Oh,
a
yeah.
guy like him. Like who's ever going to be able to say anything to Mike White realistically,
Mhm.
right? Like again, it's like the best place to be in sports is to be the backup quarterback. It's got to be awesome.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I still feel like probably Cousins, but both of those guys, excellent. Probably should be financial advisors after their career's over. That's what they should probably be doing.
Yeah,
So,
Cousins especially. But yeah, so like I said, like I really think that this is gonna push them towards
yeah.
I mean, it's weird. Like now that I've kind of been listening to some more information about this Saints trade,
Yes.
I don't think it's for a quarterback, or if it is, they're not trading up for one.
Yeah. It seems
So
like it's not trending that way necessarily.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I think there's still a chance that like Malik Willis falls to the Steelers, and if he does, I think they'll definitely take him now.
Yeah. I
Whereas,
at 20. Yeah.
right, whereas before this, I think if he did, they might waffle on it a bit.
Yeah.
And I still think I still think like trading down and then maybe getting Desmond Ritter at the end of the first round will be a savvy move. Because again, like with Ritter, he brings you that professional competence of a guy like Kenny Pickett, but I think he just has a lot more upside than Pickett does. Like Pickett is about exactly what he's going to be, whereas I think Ritter still has a little bit of room to grow, and he's like, okay, this guy could still be something pretty special.
I think it comes down to like with Ritter is he doesn't really use his athleticism to the full extent that he could, and I think
Mhm.
that's where the upside you could find it because
Yeah,
he didn't, especially this past year, like he didn't really use his legs in the way that he probably can, and he's
right.
just operating so efficiently from the pocket or trying to
And
do
I
that.
think I think they drilled that into him. They're like, we want
Yes,
you to stay within the offense, because we have the talent and our defense is really
yes,
good. Like, stay within games, so don't just play within the system. Don't mess this up. And also, like, I agree with you. Like, he didn't use his athleticism as much, but like, he is not like a Lamar or even a Malik Willis like type
no,
of runner where he
right.
like if he gets a lane, he's going to take it for yards, but he's not like going to be shaking people in the open field or running over guys or
No,
anything like
it's
that.
more so like I didn't see a lot of play extension from him,
Sure. Yeah.
which is where I think that a guy with his level of athleticism, where yeah, if you get him going like in a straight line, and he has a
Mhm.
lane, then he's kind of like that Daniel Jones type of like he's not actually that great of an athlete. But whenever you get him in a straight line, he's hard to catch.
Yeah.
But I want to see him make more plays off schedule because as good as he could be at times when
Mhm.
he's on schedule, outside of the accuracy concerns, that would be where you can unlock some upside from him is if he can show a little bit of off-platform stuff and,
Yeah.
and stuff
I
like
feel like
that.
he'd have
So
like one play a game where we'd like, oh, like a little
yeah,
flag would go up, like, oh,
right.
that's interesting. But then like it'd
That's
be,
it. Yeah,
but then it's just like RPOs and like
right.
like boot slide throws
Yeah,
and
and
just easy
it's
stuff.
yeah, and again, you're projecting at that point, which is kind of where like this whole draft class of quarterback
Oh
is
yeah.
a lot of projecting, and that's
Mhm.
kind of why, as much as I do think that it's very likely they're going to end up going in that direction,
Mhm.
I I don't personally love it just because I like to have a little bit less things to have to project on
Yeah.
guys. That's really kind of what it comes down to for me. But
Yeah. I've been banging this drum for a while, but like I really don't want them to take a quarterback in the first unless they trade down.
yeah, if they
Because
trade down and they can get somebody, and get some extra draft capital, that's
yeah.
at least it actually does make sense to do that then because you're getting extra draft capital for this year, maybe next. So,
Yeah. Because,
but
even as it stands now, aside from quarterback, they still have a good amount of needs. Like,
yes, yeah,
and again, not many of them are super pressing besides strong safety, which again, there's still time to bring back Terrell
Edmonds or
Edmonds, Matthew's still on the market.
Yeah, well, no, yeah.
They've been interested in Devontae Casey apparently, so there's still time with that. But they still have get another wide receiver, get another cornerback. Start kind of rethinking about the future of the defensive line. Uh, get a backup tight end, get a backup running back, that kind of stuff.
Third receiver, yeah.
Yeah, third, definitely get a third receiver. But actually, that's something that we were gonna get into this week until the Haskins news happened.
Right.
So we're gonna kind of dive into where the Steelers stand from a cap perspective on next
Mhm.
week's episode, where we can devote the whole episode to that and say, like, okay, like how does this affect how they're attacking this draft and how even they're going to attack next year,
Yeah, for sure.
in terms of like a long-term strategy. And obviously that'll depend a lot on how Trubisky performs this year
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. But that's gonna do it for us for this week because we kind of wanted to just stick with the Haskins stuff, which is again really just sucks to
Yeah, it's
put it
yeah,
bluntly.
like, this is the type of thing that you don't wanna ever have to report on or talk
Mhm.
about, obviously, so, like, obviously, things will move along and everything, and that's kinda how it works, but I do think that his presence is gonna be felt for quite a while within the organization, so,
Yeah, I mean, they all the players and coaches said, he was a really impactful person
yeah.
just in terms of his infectious personality and everything. So, and this is where this is a time where it's like, okay, you're really glad you have a guy like Mike Tomlin as the head coach
Yes.
because, like I said, Steelers have had these kind of weird tragedies as of late, but I don't think a team player on the team hasn't died. That's so rare in the NFL
Yeah, it's
where
a
a
different
current player,
conversation.
especially
Yeah.
one so young, is just suddenly gone. So I'm happy that they at least have a experienced head coach who's going to be able to kind of help them weather this and be able to try to move forward.
Right. Yeah.
Anything else you want to plug before we head out for tonight?
No, I think that kind of covers everything we want to talk about for now. Like, so we'll get more into the minutia of draft, like where we're at with the draft and
Mhm.
salary cap and everything else next week. So,
All right. So make sure you're following us on Twitter at Shane Kubis, at Mitchell T. Wolf on Twitter. Make sure you're following Around the Block on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Steelers ATB on Twitter, all that jazz. Thanks for tuning in. We hope to have you back next time.